Can I get like a pinky one? Yeah, awesome, thank you. Now, vendors, let's get you guys prepped for auction day because it's gonna be a big, big day for you lot. You're gonna be nervous and you've got every right to be, so accept the fact that you're nervous. In fact, if you were telling me that you weren't nervous, I'd think you'd be lying, to be perfectly frank. Even if you've done this 100 times, there's always that degree of nerves kicking around. So you've got to make sure you acknowledge that, right? So, first thing, before we get onto the actual auction bit, presentation is quite a large part as to whether you're going to have a successful day. Sensors are massive when everybody's looking through a property. So make sure you pay attention to the smell, the sight, the sound of what's going on in your property as well. I'm not talking about being all cliche and baking a cake and all that sort of jazz, because all that's going to do is increase your waistline. However, when it comes to giving that first impression, you've got to make sure that it's a good one. If you're not prepared to put in the effort in presentation, you're gonna struggle to get the right price because it will cost you money. End of the day, that's what it's gonna do. So if you've not got the motivation to get the presentation right, think of the dollars because it's going to affect your hip pocket, whether you do the effort or don't do the effort. Now, on auction day itself, you're going to have a little bit of a process before you get into the nitty-gritty part of it, which is the bidding. There's going to be a half-hour presentation beforehand, which is your open for inspection. Now, that's a legal requirement, believe it or not, because we've got to have all the paperwork on display, the legislation, all that sort of stuff has to be on display for half an hour prior to the auction. When the thing gets started, the auctioneer's got to then go through the legal bits and bobs in order to make sure that everyone's okay with the contract of sale. So that's the next part. Then we get everyone fired up and get into the bidding. How much do I owe you, Doc? $35. Awesome, good stuff.
Is the tap okay?
Tap's cool. Now, when the auction gets started, we call for that opening bid. Now, it might happen, it might not happen. Generally speaking, that first bid is a tough one to get because no one likes being the first one on the dance floor. Thanks, Doc. Yeah, no problem, thank you. Now, when we've got that first bid, whether it's a vendor bid or whether it's a genuine bid from the crowd, don't stress about the level that that bid is at because chances are it's going to be low, all right? It's going to be a low one, so don't panic because it's not necessarily where that auction needs to end. So we'll try and get some bids and we'll try and get things moving along as best as we can, and then at some point or another there'll be a bit of a break. What will happen then is the auctioneer and the agent will come in and have a chat to you about the lay of the land and let you know what's going on out there in the crowd. Now, if you've got a video stream or a live stream, that can be really helpful so that you can see the action for yourself. That's really, really cool. But if not, make sure you're within earshot at the very, very least, and so that you can have a basic understanding as to what's going on. Now, at that break, you're gonna have at least 5 main scenarios. One of these ones will be coming at you, and it's always good to be prepared for any one of these 5, irrespective of how good the campaign's gone. So the first one is the worst case scenario, which is we've had no bids, we've called a vendor bid, we're still not getting any action, and we're really struggling to get things going, okay? If that happens, then generally speaking, the auctioneer will place another vendor bid at a more appropriate level and then pass the property in. That's worst case. So all of this is part of a process. If it sells, great. If it doesn't, then if you're with a proactive agent who actually knows what they're doing, then it's not going to be the end of the world because they will have contingency plans in place ready to go. Now the next one is that you've not made reserve, but you've had some genuine bids. So you've had a bit of action, which is great, but it's not quite made the mark. 2 things from this. 1, the market's trying to tell you something, so you may need to pay attention to that. But 2, you've at least got someone there that is prepared to put some of their hard-earned money on the table for your property, which is always a good thing. If we have to pass the property into a genuine bidder, we'll make sure that we lock them into a negotiation. Exclusive rights to negotiate is a big thing for buyers at the minute. So we'll try and make sure that we make the most of that and go one-on-one from a negotiation point of view. Thank you, madam. These are for the missus, by the way.
And on there is a 10% off for your next purchase.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Doc. Thank you. Much appreciated. Now, next scenario is if we've almost made reserve, and this is when you're going to have a bit of decision on your hands. So, if we're almost at reserve, you've got to look at the risk versus reward. okay? The risk versus reward. If your reserve's at, say, $500,000, and we're about $10,000 or $8,000 shy of that, you've got to listen to your auctioneer and listen to the agent and listen to whether they believe that there is enough competition out there that will allow you to run the gamble of putting it on the market slightly earlier because you're going to get past your original point. Now, the whole point of an auction is to create fear of loss within the buyer population. And if you can get them in that peak state where a lot of buyers won't do anything until you say that it's on the market at the end of the day, but when they do hear those words or where they do know that they're going to lose the property if they don't put their hand up, that's when we're going to bridge that emotional gap from logical price to that emotional value that is where you guys are going to be at your most happy. So that's what you've got to assess, whether it's worth putting it on the market slightly earlier or hanging fire. Because a lot of the time, it's sometimes quite a good idea to pass it in to a highest bidder because you've got them on a one-on-one negotiation. It can actually be a more powerful position. So pay attention to your auctioneer and your agent if there is a front runner that is clearly going to make sure that they don't miss out on the property. Now, the next scenario, gang, is if we've just about hit reserve. If that's the case, auctioneer will come in, just make sure you're happy to go on the market, head out there for the bonus round. That's when you know you've won, guys, but the one asterisk that I'll put on that is it's your property. Providing you've given yourselves a dynamic reserve, bear in mind, guys, that it is your home. Now, I'm not telling you to raise your reserve because you'd just be shooting yourself in the foot and wasting your time being on the market. But if for whatever reason, you decide that you didn't want to sell, you have every right to do that. And I'm just being transparent with you. Now, the last scenario is the really cool one where you've shot past reserve. In that instance, a lot of the time, it's no good having the auctioneer come in because breaking that momentum can absolutely destroy the auction's pace. So what might happen in that scenario is the agent might nip in, make sure you're happy to go on the market, come back out and tell the auctioneer while they're still doing the auction. That is the best case scenario because you don't want to stop the train if the momentum is such that it's just going to go rocketing through to a conclusion. Only when you've gone past your reserve will that happen, guys, unless you say to your agent specifically that you want to have a break and just make sure that you're happy with what's going on before you go on the market. If that's the case, and that's totally fine, let your agent know. Big thing with this, guys, is transparency. I'm trying to be transparent with you. You've got to make damn sure that you're transparent with us, the auctioneers and the agents, because if you don't, that's when mistakes can creep in, that's when problems can happen, and that's when anxiety just goes through the roof, which is never any good for anyone. So again, you got the 5 scenarios: no bids, genuine bid under reserve, almost at reserve, and then you got a decision to make, past reserve, and then rocketing through to a conclusion. Hope that helps, gang. Hopefully you're going to pay attention to that because all that we want to do is get the best for your property. And by having that information on hand, you're going to be able to focus on what's important.